do have the seasonal allergies that are much like my partner on the podcast, and they're just a constant annoyance in my life.
Back to my intro. Thank you for being here today with us on FORTitude.
The words have gotten undistorted, but what they meant to say was not reported. Before the torches come to town, we gonna burn this fort down.
Greetings to our beloved listeners. I am J.W. Wilson, and this walking pollen trap to my right is one Britton Payne.
I do have the seasonal allergies that are much like my partner on the podcast, and they're just a constant annoyance in my life.
Back to my intro. Thank you for being here today with us on FORTitude. You can continue to say and do, this is speaking to our listeners, they continue to do and say things that make us feel welcome. And then as this, we're doing something positive in this world. So we want to thank you guys. And if you want to you keep commenting, especially on my partner's wardrobe, keep it up. That's the only way.
What are they commenting on?
Well, for instance, one lady was wondering if you could loosen maybe a few buttons a time or two ago.
Oh,
really? One lady said less vests.
Less vests?
Pullovers.
Oh.
This was during the summertime because you were wearing some vests during the summertime, I think.
Well, it's nice because we record now in the week, and JW turns the air conditioner on here at his building during the weekdays.
Call us crazy, yes. But anyway, if you have any more fashion advice for myself or Brenton, please hit us up on our little site called FORTitude.fwpodcast.com, Brenton. Excuse me, fwpodcast@gmail.com is our website. I really got that one smoothly.
So somebody can email those wardrobe suggestions.
YouTube, yes. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Facebook, Insta, and Twitter, Fortitude FW. Please hit us up. We would love to hear more information about us that's maybe positive or not so positive. But we aren't here to talk about wardrobe, Brenton. We, in fact, are in the presence of a very interesting and accomplished woman. She oversees the Tarrant County criminal justice system and was kind enough to spend some time with us here today. She's the Tarrant County District Attorney. Her name is Sharen Wilson. Thank you, Sharon, for being with us here today. We appreciate it.
I think it's my pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your time with us.
You have an interview to make up your mind. So Sharon, Brenton, this is her office, I think. Is that correct? Which floor is your
top
floor?
That would be the jail.
Right.
Are you in this executive wing up
yeah,
here?
I know.
Yeah.
Penthouse.
Very close, though.
Yeah.
You are from Amarillo, Texas, originally, and you attended Texas Tech and thus Texas Tech Law School. You made your way into the criminal justice world, and here in Tarrant County became our criminal prosecutor for Criminal Courts number 1, correct?
I was the judge of Criminal District Court number 1. When I first got here, I was a prosecutor in Tim Curry's office. I got hired on as a line lawyer.
Okay.
And we'll delve into that here shortly, but then you became in 2014 the 14th District Attorney in Tarrant County history and the very first woman to do that. Very cool.
Yes, thanks.
So what was it that brought you here? Tim Curry? Was it?
I got a job.
Is that what it was? I mean, out of school?
So yeah, you graduate from law school, and with everybody else that gets out, you start looking for a job, and they hired me. So
that's great.
I came here.
What was it about here that attracted you?
I got a job.
That's it? Wasn't the
Did you have to go a certain amount of counties away from Lubbock County or? So,
I'd always Fort Worth is a neat place to be. And I'd always known about Fort Worth because my grandparents who lived in Claude, Texas, outside Amarillo, our farm was in Claude, always took the Fort Worth Sunday Star Telegram. So I'd known about Fort Worth my whole life because they always read the Sunday paper and talked about it. So.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Any memorable stories from there that stick out?
I just remember the Fort Worth Star Telegram.
Yeah.
As a judge in Criminal Courts number 1, you were once referred to as the toughest judge in Tarrant County. Do you remember those days?
Yes.
What made you such a tough judge?
Well, I paid a whole lot of money to a campaign consultant to do that slogan. So
did it work?
It's a tough Republican.
Was it accurate?
It was very accurate. It wasn't a lie. So that, Okay, so what makes a person a tough judge? So a judge is supposed to just follow the law, right? That's easy enough. Follow the law. Sustained, overruled, next case. You're not supposed to have an opinion about the facts of the case. You are supposed to follow the law. Prosecutors and defense attorneys get to have opinions. They get to litigate and advocate, but judges just make rulings. That's how it ought to be, right? So But in our system of justice, we let the defendant choose who he wants to set punishment if he's found guilty. So if the defendant's found guilty, he can either pick before trial that he wants a jury to set his punishment or a judge to set his punishment. And nobody picked me.
Ever.
Twice in 23 years.
And what happened to them? They're still locked away.
Pretty much.
Yeah. That would give you a good moniker for the toughest.
But let me say, I had quite a few people would pick me on guilt innocence because, you give all ties for a judge, criminal judge, all ties go to the defense. He starts off not guilty, right? So if it's just close, that's not enough.
Mm-hmm. So how do you keep unbiased? I mean, come on, we're in like opinion city, right? It's like opinions on steroids in this life that we live now. So is it that you shut all media down as soon as you like it wasn't as much, I guess, then, but how do you keep?
Oh, it was pretty significant.
Yeah.
So I think, judges can always, so a person can be a juror if they've read the paper. You don't have to come in being a blank slate.
Right.
You can read things, but you've got to be able to say, I'm going to base my decision on what I hear in court, period, and what I hear in court, because there's rules of evidence, there's objections, and all that is to get to an accurate rendition of the facts, either for the jury to decide or for the judge to decide, right? So that's why I think it's so important. Judges, if an effective judge is a lonely judge, judges shouldn't be hanging out with lawyers, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I tried not to, because what are you going to talk about? The big thing you've got in common is what's going on at the courthouse. So judges, for the most part, have their friends and family and other judges. And
we have your office picture from when you were back in the days.
Is that where you take your naps after?
Isn't that just gross?
Hanging out with lawyers at night?
And you wonder why we had COVID in the jail.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
It's not somewhere I'd ever want to be. I guess people who are there I probably feel the same, right?
Well, that's probably why you choose jury when you go in front of you, right?
Well, and the jail's not a nice place. It's not supposed to be, right? It's supposed to keep bad people away from the rest of us.
Right.
Either because they've been found guilty or because they are waiting a trial. So it's not supposed to look like the Hilton.
Yeah.
There's a more suitable picture right there. Sharon, tell the truth. As a judge, did you ever fall asleep at the desk?
No.
Never.
No.
Were you ever tempted to? You had to kind of pinch yourself, maybe?
No, probably not in a criminal. I could see in some other case, courts of law, but I wouldn't think in that one.
No.
But here's the thing.
Is it boring sometimes because you've heard it a million times, you've heard so the most boring thing is voir dire examination, right? Because the state takes 2 hours and talks to the jury and they don't make objections in each. So the judge is just sitting there listening because there's nothing to, you don't have a speaking part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then the defense does the same thing. And it's usually in the afternoon. And by like 6 o'clock, you're, tired of it. It's voir dire that's why they never show it on TV, right? Because it's boring.
Yeah.
But now you don't fall asleep.
Right.
Because you got to make rulings.
Is the ruling, like, let's say the last ruling, guilty or innocent, when sometimes it comes from the juror, sometimes it comes from you, but is that a very exciting part of the job?
Sentencing a person to death is exciting.
Is it when they deserve it? Obviously, yes. You've done that 13.
Well, we would hope that it wouldn't be
13 times, right? 13.
Well, sometimes
distance.
I was the lawyer, prosecutor, defense attorney, judge, but that is, that's different. Finding somebody guilty is not really exciting. Typically when you find somebody guilty on a regular case, it's because they've done something horrible to somebody.
Right. So
there's just some justice in that.
And you've witnessed a lethal injection, correct?
Yes.
Could you describe for us what that, aside from the obvious, not laughing at that matter, but what's that feel like?
So it was a case that I had prosecuted. I was the prosecutor on a death penalty case, and I had gotten very close with the family of the victim, and it didn't get set for execution until like 12, 13 years later. Mm-hmm. Because that's how long it takes to go all the way through the state appellate system and then the federal system, right? So it was affirmed on every level. And then when it came time for execution, I got a call from the family, and they said, basically, you said you'd stay with us through the whole thing. Are you coming with us? And so I was like, yes. And so I went with the family to the execution.
Interesting. Did you leave there needing a drink or needing just to go cry, or is it as powerful as the movies make it out to be, or is it just like
it's very final?
Very final.
And let me tell you, it was also very humane compared to what he did to this woman.
Sure.
Very humane.
Fair enough.
And the sad part about this particular case was, by the time he was executed for killing this young woman, her mother had already died of cancer. So her mom died without ever finding justice.
Oh, wow.
So I went with the former husband, the widow, her brothers, and we called the dad on the way back, driving back.
Do you see the justice thing that more and more as the world kind of continues to evolve in certain ways, or at least it's being reported that it is, that things like that continue to happen where justice is not served? What's your kind of take on that?
What is justice?
And is the work never done? Right. I mean, are you winning the battle now, or is it just like, gosh, there's just so much to keep up with and with all of this? I mean, I know you're not a judge now, but you're kind of at your spot there. I mean, are you overwhelmed, or you have things out in front of you that are like, we're making good headway here, we continue to do this, that type of thing? Sorry, that's a meander question.
No, I get where you're going. So, crime has changed. And I don't know that I realized the extent to which crime has changed, because I was a judge for 23 years, but I had one of the 10 criminal district courts. So I only ever saw 10% of the felonies. I never saw misdemeanors. I saw 10% of the felonies, the ones that were computer assigned to my court. And then when I became district attorney and started looking at the broader picture of what crimes were actually being committed, I was surprised to find that we were number 2 in the state on intimate partner violence, women killed by their spouses. Number 2 in the state, not per capita, number 2. And Houston was number 1.
Wow.
Yeah, we were second to Harris County. And at that time, we were the 4th county. It was Harris, Dallas, Bexar, and then us. So,
Population-wise.
So that was huge. We went to the commissioner's court in 2015. In 2015, we went to the commissioner's court. Maybe it was the beginning of 2016. It was for the budget in 2016. In 2015, 16 people in Tarrant County had been killed by their spouses, almost all women. Purely a, female crime, really. One man had died that year, but he was a secondary victim. They were shooting at the wife and killed him too.
Oh, wow.
The second year, 2016, it was the same number. It was 16 people again. And we had secondary victims, small children,
Was there a reason, like a leading reason? Can you get into that? Like, can you find that in the data, or like, what is it?
It's very interesting. Here's the thing about intimate partner violence. It's very controlled, right? So if a man wants to beat his wife, he can be thinking about it all day long, and he doesn't do anything. He doesn't beat up his secretary. He doesn't beat up anybody else at work. He probably doesn't even react, and he stores it all up and then does it at home. That means it's controllable, right? And there's actually some excellent studies out there about how you control that kind of violence. We worked on some of that. We went to commissioner's court and asked them for a team and just took pictures of the deceased, lifetime pictures. But, it's horrifying when you see all those people that have been killed by their spouses. So we started working on that. The next year it dropped to 8 people. That's still too many. The year after that, 8 people, but we were, elated. And then 2020 happened, and we actually lost, depends on the count right now, but it's like 19 people last year.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
Because they couldn't get out of the house. You couldn't get out of the house, and there was no controlling it, right?
Yeah, no work to go to be somebody else at or something like
Yeah.
that.
And now we're down to about, I think this year to date, I think we've had 8 homicides, 7 or 8. That is so much better than last year. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But it's still too much. And so we've really been working with police. Our first thing is always, what is the interaction between law enforcement and the civilians? Because when you call 911, you don't get my office, right?
Mhm.
That's a good thing. You get police officers that are going to show up and do things. And that was one of the things that we worked with the police is how do they deal with these circumstances? And one of the things we found out is that if the abuser realizes that the cops are watching and are going to be watching, then they can control their behavior. Isn't that interesting?
I think Chief Noakes told us just kind of in a roundabout way, he wasn't being definitive, but the pandemic has changed crime for a while with domestic violence, alcoholism was divorces spiked up. This isn't all stuff you deal with, but I think the domestic abuse aspect, which you just alluded to, was significantly affected by the pandemic because we're all at home all day together, and maybe some of us aren't built that way. I don't know. There's no reason, there's no excuse for it, obviously, but that was a big deal because of the pandemic.
And it significantly went up, which in 2020, crime across the board, and I just deal with Tarrant County, right? Not any particular, but across the board in Tarrant County, crime went down. Our case filings went down in Tarrant County in 2020. Family violence went up.
So would you tell us, Sharon, what a day in the life of the district attorney looks like, generally speaking, so someone can understand how your world works?
You wake up on the cot right there.
Yeah. I think that when I wanted to be district attorney, I thought I'm going to get to try cases again because I loved trying cases when I was an assistant district attorney. And boy, that doesn't happen because there's too much going on, right? So we have a law office of 344 people, close to 200 attorneys, 100 staff people, 50 investigators. And so the life of the district attorney is really a management job. And for me, it is a day in the life. I get to work. This morning we had a meeting in our office with police officers from around the county because the new mental health jail diversion center is going to be opening at the end of the year. And so our office is providing the training to the police officers for what mental health, who's going to be appropriate for the diversion center, not going to jail. So that was the beginning. We had a couple of meetings. We had the Tarrant County Law Enforcement Memorial this morning, which is a great thing that Tarrant County got actually built and dedicated in May. We added 3 more officers' names to that today because they had died in the last year, mostly because of COVID. And then, meetings about process. A lot of what I've tried to do is look at the data, what do we need to be addressing and how do we do that? And then here I am today.
Thank you.
Doing a podcast.
Their first podcast, correct?
My first podcast ever.
So far, do you hate it or do you love it?
Y'all said put these earphones on. They are kind of cool.
I know. Well, it makes it sound like when you're
Sounds
doing
like
it.
you're in an airplane.
So we're in an office building. Sorry, but we're in an office building, and people will be talking over there doing office type work, and sometimes it's distracting if you don't have the earphones on. So we appreciate you giving them.
We know by our
cool.
set design, you would never know that we're in an office building. But so we do have a proposition coming up on the ballot. So you think about really quickly growing population in Tarrant County, and you've got infrastructure like roads, sewer, like things that people need to live, that kind of thing. But on the other side of that, we've got another building that we're getting built with that Proposition B. Can you talk about that and what that fulfills? And to me, that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It's like, is it because crime's going to go up with more people coming in? I mean,
Okay, so yes, crime's going up with more people coming in.
Is that
population increase means that crime increases, except maybe Florida in the winter, right?
they're too old and retired?
You age out of criminality. So, if all these people are coming here, there's going to be an increase in crime, huge increase in population, right? And the Hobby Center was estimating that by 2040 we'll be almost at 3 million. Okay. So not only do we have an increase in population, we have to in our office, we have asked for and received special teams to address specific crimes. Because when you look at the data, there is an increase in various kinds of crimes. Like we talked about intimate partner violence. Mm-hmm. One of the first things that we knew that we needed as soon as I got here was elder financial fraud, because the population's getting older and they're targets, right? Let me say that. We are targets. And that's a wonderful team that works on that. And then, we've always had gang. We've always had child sexual assault. We have an adult sexual assault team. It's our newest group that really deals with dating violence. And they do an amazing work. In fact, they just finished that trial of the woman who was kidnapped and murdered in 1974. Do you remember that? And the defendant, McCurley, what was he, 80-something years old?
Oh, yeah.
And so they just tried that case, a cold case, but they've done a great work on looking at all these adult sexual assault cases, the rapes in Tarrant County, to look at patterns. It's been very interesting. And so
does it become kind of a competition between counties and DA's offices who has the best data around that and the way that it's collected?
That's interesting. I have no idea what other offices' data is.
You just guys go with what you got. Yeah.
We look a lot at what ours is and trends. What is it now? What has it been?
Yep.
Because I don't think every county is the same. And, Texas is huge.
Yeah.
And it's just huge. And so even, the big counties may look at certain things themselves, but no, we don't really.
We probably can find this, but let me ask this just in a quick summary pie chart, because you just listed off a bunch of stuff. Domestic abuse, like what takes up the biggest chunk of that pie as far as crime goes?
Oh, the number one offense committed in Tarrant County?
Yeah.
So countywide, possession of marijuana 0 to 2.
What's 0 to 2? Years?
Ounces.
Oh, ounces. Okay.
Do you think that's kind of silly, or that laws seem to be changing? Not yet.
Is it?
Well, I mean, across the country they are. I'm just
maybe not
telling you what
Judge Wilson's court.
I read
I
sometimes.
don't care about the rest of the country. I just care about Texas, right?
Fair enough.
And Tarrant County,
because
right?
we are not in Colorado.
Right. But things are changing. You can at least admit that, yes.
They have changed to the east of us.
I know
yes,
legislature
they have.
was discussing the potential for this new revenue source if it were to become legalized. I'm not saying I know can speak more of that, but there are people that are discussing this. So that would take a little bit of a burden off our hands, potentially.
Is it a burden?
I don't know. You have to spend time prosecuting these guys, and maybe that's a burden. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's part of the good part of the job. I don't know.
So here's the great thing about my job. I don't make the laws. All I have to do is read them.
Fair enough.
I took an oath to follow the law. So if the legislature says that possession of marijuana 0 to 2 is a crime, then it's a crime.
All right.
That's not my call. It is my call.
No interpretation. See, no bias. Just like when she was a judge, she's going with that. Yeah.
So it is my ability as the prosecutor to decide what offer we should make, right? I don't think that the taxpayers in Tarrant County, and I certainly am not interested in filling our jail up with a bunch of possession of marijuana 0 to 2. And so in our office, on every possession of marijuana 0 to 2, we tell the defense attorney and the client, if they want to look online, if they'll go get 3 consecutive clean UAs, 3 months of sobriety, we'll just dismiss. Because sobriety, in my opinion, is kind of the beginning of rehabilitation. It's like, can I get on with my life without marijuana?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be a good effect. We don't have, the number of people that are possession of marijuana is not a huge repeat group, right? So
yeah,
surely.
I don't need them in jail.
Limit on the intent to distribute? Because now I'm figuring out a way where one could get caught with like the minimal amount, and then like, no, I'm kidding. I'm being kind of smart out.
Yeah, when you get to felony amounts, then we've got bigger problems.
Okay, so that's one piece. That's the biggest piece of the pie chart.
Yep.
What's the next biggest?
So the number 2 offense in Tarrant County in the whole county is possession of controlled substance. That's felony level. That's
like the hard drugs.
Yeah. And the number 3 offense is family violence. That is not acceptable.
Absolutely.
How many times does one of those other 2 categories intervene with that third?
Oh, that's interesting. Probably not
as much as you'd think.
How many times is the person who beats their spouse also drunk or on drugs? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's got to be in there somewhere, right?
Yeah. But we
Well,
don't
but
really
not-
know
but-
that
but-
because remember, beating your spouse is a very controlled act.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes against what you think. It goes against what you see in movies. You know, people are drinking or using drugs and it's
No,
very,
you make it all day, right? Without it, kind of thing, right? Is what you've kind of
because
said
they're mad
before.
when something, she did something wrong that morning. They're mad all day.
But like you said, it's a controlled act. This person who's doing this horrible thing knows that it's bad. They're keeping it at bay until and the alcohol
Till they
or the
can be
drugs are loosening them up. They're like, oh, okay. And
It can be.
Sure. One thing you mentioned, Sharon, fraud. You mentioned elderly fraud. One of the things I love reading about you, but what kind of things are people doing fraudulent wise to the elderly that you're seeing?
Before, can we get a word from our sponsor that's just on a timeshare for people 65 and older? Just 1 second. Just kidding.
So the person who's the best on elder financial fraud is Lori Varnell. She's the head of our team. She's amazing. And so there's all kinds, right? Some of it is the computer kinds of
Email,
crimes,
phishing,
right?
and all that.
Because even somebody who pays a lot of attention and says, "Oh, I'm not going to fall for this," can fall for it. Some of them are just good, right? Or they're just,
There's a lot of people in Uganda who need that money today.
Don't let them sidetrack you,
I know.
Sharon.
I'm like, I'm not going there.
This is a tough job sitting at this desk. I understand.
And some of them, like one of the cases that Lori and her team tried, I think it was 2 years ago, was a sweetheart swindler, right? So this woman who was probably a gypsy would meet people online or run into them in the grocery store during the day, and she would just talk to them and get to be their best friend. And this particular woman stole, millions of dollars from 8 different victims. And the jury in Tarrant County, very nice looking, everybody, the families of these victims who lost all their money, said she was so nice, and she talked about Jesus, and, they trusted her. And she stole all this money. The jury gave her 85 years in the penitentiary.
Ooh,
85. Wow. Thank you, Lori.
Do you think she learned her lesson?
Well, she's got time to think about it.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah. So, wow.
So what about gambling? This comes up, these card, do we have a whole nother show on this? Should we
we got another show on that.
But, that's
our
another
audio
thing.
video crew just took off, by the way.
I know, right?
Yeah. Go ahead and hide the craps table that's on the pool table. No, but I just curious because it comes in all different forms. You got the electronic stuff, and so where, again, it's a law, and where are you on some of that? Is that too hard of a question?
It's a law. It's not, it's not a hard question.
Not up for interpretation, Britton.
It's a law.
Right back at me. Yeah. Yeah.
Couple things you've done, Sharon. I'll give you a little.
If the camera couldn't catch her eyes just looking at me like that, it's unbelievable.
Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
It's okay. A couple things you've done, noteworthy things we can discuss here. You established the Citizen Advisory Committee. You have started the DA's annual report. I'm going to ask you about just if you. Well,
I should have brought you one.
Let's start with the Citizen Advisory Committee in a brief summation. What's going on there?
What we did was get people from throughout the county to sit down at the table and talk about, what do you want from the DA's office? And it was really, so we haven't had a meeting since 2020, right? COVID. Nobody wants to meet.
Yeah.
But early on when we started, we had people from various organizations and various parts of town, the, south side of Fort Worth, Colleyville, South Lake. And it was really interesting the first couple of meetings because they were like, the people from the South Side or minority groups were saying, oh, those people in Colleyville and South Lake, they don't have any crime. Oh, yes, they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things like with intimate partner violence, you find out, you look at that list, those photographs, it's the whole dang county and it's every single race. And it's every single, you can look at the pictures.
Economic
and obviously
level.
These people are very, very wealthy and these people are not. Just you can tell by their clothes, right? So there are a lot of commonalities and it's hard for people to recognize that.
Right.
And, we try to focus over and over again that we are countywide, right? So
Say more money, more problems. More money, more crime, I think. Maybe better. Right? Well, anyway, okay, you started the DA's annual report.
Yes, first one in Texas, and we do it every single year. I wish I'd brought you one because the one for 2020 has got the Lady Justice on the front, and she's got a blue glove and a mask.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Does it involve numbers, though?
Yeah, it's got all kinds of data.
I'm glad you forgot that today. That makes our job easier. You founded Tarrant County's first conviction integrity unit.
Yes, we were the 17th one in the nation when we started because the whole idea is I'm absolutely fine with locking bad people up for crimes that they've committed. I'm not okay if we have the wrong person or if they've been sentenced excessively.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's what that conviction integrity group does is really look at all of our cases. And one of the great things about Tarrant County, Tim Curry, who was the DA forever, right? He had a policy that it was called the open file policy. And if you worked for him as a prosecutor, you were required to give everything in your case file to the defense attorney because he didn't want anybody trying to ambush someone, right?
Yeah.
That was in the 70s. That was so far ahead of the time, which was 2014,
Right.
when they passed a law and said that had to be the standard in the state of Texas. We'd been doing it since the 70s. That's why you really don't have a lot of exonerations in Tarrant County. We've had one, and it dealt with jailhouse informants. You can tell me when I'm getting too.
Oh, this is
So
good.
the interesting thing about jailhouse informants is, we have informants on the street, confidential
Yeah.
informants. It's a good thing. It helps solve crime.
That's where I met JW in the jailhouse informant program.
Well, now I'm not undercover anymore.
Sorry.
So in jail, somebody may be, officing next to you, maybe in the
Mhm.
cubby next door.
Yeah.
And they send out a letter saying, so-and-so told me all about their crime and I want to testify against them. Jailhouse informants. The problem was this one case that we had, the defendant was convicted based on the jailhouse. There wasn't a lot of as evidence. There wasn't, damning DNA evidence. There just wasn't a lot of evidence.
Mhm.
What kind of crime was it?
Murder. It was a murder. It was in Bedford. He was an African-American man. She was a white female. They were friends. And there was, but the police at the time had done the investigation. Okay, who kills most women? Spouses and loved ones, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the,
Wait, I didn't know the answer. How did you know that so easily?
because we've been talking about it, who's been listening.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
My
what
headphones.
was touche? All my listening
Will
is
you
now
turn-
written out on the paper.
Will you turn my headset up, please?
Sorry.
Continue. Sorry.
So it was very interesting because this guy that had testified against him in his trial and said, he told me he did all this stuff, was like a regular informant in Tarrant County. And
Yeah.
he'd been doing it. He did it every time he got in jail. He would squeal on somebody to get his case dismissed. He'd been a confidential informant like 4 times. Here's the problem. The defense attorney didn't know it. The trial attorneys for the state didn't know it because you can't know what goes on in somebody else's case. It's too big a county. There's too many trials. If you're a prosecutor and you're in your court doing your work, you're not watching the 8 or 9 other courts, right?
Oh,
And so we didn't have a process. Our office, nobody in Texas had a process for watching out for jailhouse informants. So this guy had gotten away with it. And he'd been in jail. And we expressed all that and he got exonerated and removed from jail, from the penitentiary. That was great. The biggest thing to come out of that, though, while it was huge for him, was that we were able to start a policy in our office that dealt with jailhouse informants. So you can't do that. You can't use somebody multiple times without anybody knowing it.
Sure.
And actually that also became the basis of legislation the next time the
Did it pass?
legislature. Yeah.
oh yeah. So that's actually quite interesting. I can't believe they don't have a movie or something on that very thing of the jailhouse informant like that, because you would think that not only would people inside of there do that. Does that happen when the defense then makes, or the prosecution, do you find that they, in the criminal courts, they find one thing and really grab onto, and they're putting all their weight in it, and then as a judge or as another attorney going up against them, you're like, this isn't what you should have put all your weight in? Like, is there a certain part of that in each case where somebody's like, this is going to be not
So
just
if
the closing argument?
So interestingly, this case was not prosecutorial misconduct and it wasn't defense misconduct, right? It was literally evidence that the prosecutor had no way of knowing because it happened in other courts and other cases. And when the prosecutor looked at that case, he had reason to believe that this person was guilty. There was evidence. And so this other piece of an informant saying, well, he told me these facts about the case, which were true. You'd have to know it. So I don't know that it was tunnel vision. We're just putting focus on that, but it certainly showed us that, that we have pieces of evidence that we've got to be especially careful of. And jailhouse informants is one of them.
Did that come out of that conviction integrity unit?
Yes.
That's great.
That is great because every time that happens, it's obviously not all the time, but those are magnificent stories. Huge. Yeah, and the person, I mean, we've all seen movies and stories to that effect. So that's a great job you did on that.
Citizen Prosecutor Academy.
Oh, everybody needs to take that.
I think I would be good at that.
It's, well, you don't get to go be a prosecutor.
We're we're getting a lesson now.
You get to accuse people of being guilty before presumed innocent?
You could give your opinion about poker rooms. I'm kidding.
How did you know I asked about poker rooms?
Because you did just a minute ago.
Oh, I was trying to keep that on the down low.
We have rounded up some of the students in your mentorship program, and we've put them on display for you here.
We had to blur out some of their information.
Don't you worry about the slideshow.
You blurred out a lot of information.
Sharon, don't worry about our slideshow. It's having some technical difficulties. We'll correct all that in the editing room. In fact, our film guys, he's on here probably somewhere. Where is he? No, he made him. He make the list this time. So these cats. So these are some bad dudes in Tarrant County. Does this list flow through your office, through your hands? Do you see this? Is this purely police generated? Are you any connected to this deal right here?
No.
Most wanted. But obviously, all those people are of interest to you at some level. Hopefully, you get to meet them someday. I'm assuming.
See, they're only of interest to me when the police arrest them and file a case. So it's a whole lot like the TV show, Law and Order. And one of the things that I've started doing this year is talk to people about the difference between policing and prosecution and judges, right? Because it's kind of a mess. But no, those are of great interest to law enforcement. And they're not of any interest to me until somebody files a case because I have enough to do. We review about 50,000 criminal cases in Tarrant County every year.
Good grief.
Every year. And so, no, I don't care about that until somebody arrests them and files a case. And then I care a whole lot about it.
Then when does it lead up to you? Because you're not reviewing all 50,000. So you've got a management team below you. Which ones rise up to your office?
The only cases that I personally review are the death penalty cases, because if in our office, if we're going to seek a death sentence, then it's my decision. Nobody else ought to have to do that.
How many of those 50,000 on average? 4? 2?
That I review?
Or that are become death penalty?
Oh, that's
15.
No, I'm thinking like monthly. It's probably like 7 a month, 5 to 7 a month.
Okay. Yeah. So on average, 80 something, 100 something, maybe like a year.
Right.
Of those 50,000. Yeah.
Unless there's a problem, not hear about those cases, but the ones that typically I look at are and we rarely seek a death sentence. Rarely.
Would you be safe to say you're pro death penalty?
It's the law.
It's the law.
Gosh, she's used that answer like 4 times on anything we want to get kind of. Hey, where's Judge Wilson? It's the law.
Let me say this: when it's not the law, then I'm fine with that too.
I'm just asking the question.
But I actually, so the part that's discretionary with a DA is these things, these crimes are potential death sentences, and case law has told us that the death penalty is only available in certain circumstances, and so we should review those. There are a whole lot more facts that are eligible for a death penalty than we ever, because we make that choice, right? And it is a lot rarer than you think, because somebody could do something heinous, and if they've never done a crime before, then they're probably not going to be a risk in the future. Right. And that's one of the questions the jurors have to ask on death sentences. Is there a probability this person will be a danger to society in the future?
You know what's really crazy about all this talk? you talk about taking the human aspect out of a lot of this decision, right? You can't really be biased. There's a lot of statistical information. This should happen like this kind of thing. You would think that there would be an algorithm for something like this, and not for other things, right? Like that are so emotionally driven, right? Because it seems like the courts, and especially making these decisions, are all driven by, okay, numbers and very quantitative data, if you will, and that makes the best decision. Like the things you've said is like, the more human I take out of this, and make these decisions, the better. But then we have so many people representing this. It's just kind of,
I've obviously not done a good job if what I've said today makes you think that I think we ought to take the human aspect.
No, it's just,
but let me. So judges are just supposed to follow the law, period. That's it. I'm a prosecutor. I get to care about people. I get to advocate for people. And in the law, it says that prosecutors are to seek justice, not to convict. It's interesting that judges are not supposed to seek justice. Judges follow the law. Prosecutors seek justice. Alone in the criminal justice system, they're the ones that are charged with making sure that justice occurs. There's a lot of humanity involved in that. Defense attorneys are required to zealously represent their client. That's their obligation under their code of ethics, right? Their job is not to seek justice, right? Because that could be bad for their client.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do is very involved in the humanity. And when I talk about the death penalty, there's laws. And then at some point we talk to the victims' families, because some family members want this person to be executed and some don't believe in the death penalty at all. And some people want this person to be executed, but we can't get there under the law. Those are hard conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
When I was in college, Sharon, I was an intern with the DA's office. And I used to ride around with a criminal investigator named Ray Campbell. Do you remember Mr. Campbell?
Absolutely.
Fantastic human being.
He is a fantastic human being.
I remember asking him this question because I was a young kid with not much intelligence, trying to learn a little bit. And I asked him, Mr. Campbell, does the criminal justice system deter crime? It's an age-old question. Does punishment and crime in a jail deter crime? He said, JW, without a doubt, there are good people in this world and there are bad people in this world. No matter what I do or you do, there will always be that case. Do you feel as if the criminal justice system is a deterrent? Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, it's kind of an open-ended question, but people don't seem to be afraid of going to jail when they're in the act of committing a crime. It just happens, right? Is anything going to change that? Is there any way to change that? So
that's interesting, right? Because there are different goals of punishment that are actually in the penal code. So rehabilitation is supposed to be a goal of punishment. If we have a criminal justice system and somebody gets arrested, possession marijuana 0 to 2, let's rehabilitate that person. Mm-hmm. So that's the part that the prosecutors do, right? What is justice? Do we rehabilitate? Do we punish for punishment's sake? That's kind of what the death penalty is. Right. Do we do something that we hope will deter someone else? Is it going to deter someone? So the typical, when Ray was a investigator in our office, 70s, 80s, I don't know when you were riding with him, maybe 90s.
90s, yep.
He was one of our great investigators. But, at that time, the typical capital murder case was going to a 7-Eleven, robbing the place and shooting the clerk, right? That's robbery in the course of murder. That's an aggravated murder. That is capital murder eligible. And if the person had done it before, done a robbery before, done something else before, then the jury might consider sentencing that person to the death penalty. So does that person who's going out and doing that kind of crime, do they stop and think, gosh, I shouldn't do this because I don't think that that's true. Right. I agree with him. I don't think that a person in the heat of committing a crime, except maybe family violence, honestly, from the studies, can stop themselves.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's because the family violence offenders are more educated?
No, because they're not. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Okay. They're just more self-controlled.
Well, you know what I mean? Like they would read up on the law, what they could get away with or not, that would lend itself to that.
So just the regular heat of the moment crime, I don't know that anybody can stop themselves and say, ooh, I shouldn't shoot this clerk because I might get a death sentence. Mm-hmm. Which is why I don't think the death sentence is a deterrent.
I read that 97% ish of people do good, and it's the 2 and 3% of people in the world that do all the bad, that we spend all the money and people like you have to spend time and effort putting away. It seems like it's not a small amount of people, but it's a small percentage of people that are doing all these terrible things that require laws to be passed. It's a problem that may not have a solution. One likes to think that there is a way to stop people from doing these things. Do you have any thoughts on the future of the criminal justice system? Are we heading in the right track if we're getting it to be bigger as a city, as you said earlier?
We are.
And is that
so? Here's the question that I have. Is it the criminal justice system that changes people's behavior? And I would suggest not. I honestly. Okay, so when I was a judge, I had the felony alcohol intervention program, right? So everybody that we took in, they were felony drunks. They might have 7 or 8 prior DWI convictions. And instead of sending them to the pen, they went in my program, which was worse than being in the pen because we were like, calling them. I called them. I called everybody in my program at Christmas to make sure they weren't drinking. I called them on New Year's personally to make sure they weren't drinking because, you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
So... does that make a difference? We can force people to change their behavior for a little while, but one of the things that I thought was very important for them was AA. And why AA? Because it actually has foundational that there's something bigger than you that can change your behavior.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Wow. Well, our research crack team of, I said that backwards, our crack team of researchers, golly, we butchered that up. Our research team has uncovered one of your tenants. We want to know if you could tell us a little about this gentleman who seems to be living in one of your establishments.
Isn't that great? So, I didn't even know who he was because he's actually not one of ours. He's one of the feds. The feds have him. So he's in Fort Worth, Texas, but he's at the Federal Correctional Institute. And one of the law firms downtown apparently is his lawyer, and they've got a big old sign on the side of their building that says, what is it? #free Joe.
Oh, yeah.
Joe Exotic.
Joe Exotic. So.
Yeah. And maybe even advertising the school program at the football game. It's the same thing. Yeah, for sure.
I bet you're right. Right. Are you the same day in, day out, or do you have a side of you that's, is there a home side of Sharon and a work side of Sharon? Or
gosh, you can hope so.
We do hope so, yes.
I like to cook. I like
watch
to be
Law
with
and
my
Order?
grandkids.
You watch any of the TV shows? Any movies? Anything like that?
Why Law and Order?
I didn't even know Joe Exotic until they stuck it on the side of the building.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't,
Read.
Bluey. We watch Bluey.
Okay.
Is that a cartoon or something for kids?
It's a kids cartoon.
Yeah.
Any hobbies?
West
probably
Texas?
not.
Go out to West Texas ever? Visit your roots?
No. Because my family, at some point in life, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So, I have a very, very long-suffering husband. He's very wonderful. We've been married 25 years. And, and no, some days I leave the office and I don't have another word to say for the rest of the day because something, bad stuff happens. I spend my life with bad stuff.
Yeah.
Or weird, stuff going on with elected officials. And sometimes I just go home and sit there and John is like, so did you have a bad day? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. And he's fine. He is fine. His feelings aren't hurt, how I lucked into this man is shocking. Because, he didn't make me feel bad because I'm not being
You brought up
he's great.
humanity before, and you actually defended humanity in your profession. What can humanity bring to this world, and to make your job not have so many days like that where you see bad stuff? I just went subsurface on you. I went real down.
It's interesting because we were talking about this with some people yesterday. The relationships matter. And our community is so large that I think we've lost some of those relationships. Before I became the DA, when I was a judge, I was a cook at a homeless shelter here, regular. And
UGM?
beautiful feet.
Nice. Yep.
And, you know, it's a whole different group of people. And I also took my people that were in my felony alcohol program and it was an amazing thing because they, you know, remember these were the 7-8 time DWIs. And almost every time somebody met somebody they knew that hadn't gotten sober, that was living on the streets. But I think those connections are enormous. And it's really something that we've kind of internally started talking about is how do we, because you're never, so we have this thing called Speakers on the Road. We started when I got there. I want everybody going out in the community, talking, doing whatever they can, because how's anybody going to trust us if they don't know us?
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to trust us if you don't know us.
Yeah.
So we spend as an office as much time as we possibly can trying to get out in the public and just make those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great answer. It's good to know that people in your line of work, and we know some police officers and some people that do that sort of thing, that they can turn off the bad and go live, be a happy person at home and have families and kids and stuff. That it's actually something we've often wondered about people in your line of work, how they can separate the two, because it certainly can't always be easy. But appreciate you trying to answer that question. So.
Okay, here's the other side of that.
Yep.
When I got here, when I came here for a job, right? Came to
Yeah.
work at the DA's office. I can still tell you the first homicide scene I went to. I can describe it to you in detail. I can tell you the first dead body I saw. I can tell you the first photos that I saw when I was a baby prosecutor and I was going to watch a grand jury presentation. I mean, you know, some of that stuff
You can't undo.
you've got it
Right.
forever. You know, I mean, I've got stuff I saw on warrants for the police when I was a judge. I mean, there's stuff. And so, you know, you have to, at some point, if you're going to keep doing this for your whole life, be able to compartmentalize that.
Surely.
I would love to be a fly on the wall when you say a prayer at night. Because I would imagine there's a lot. You just gave us two sides of a coin, you know, that's got to be, it would be very interesting. I don't know how you put some of this stuff to rest, you know, because there's a part you have to be really tough and strong for your job about, but there's another part, like you said, and defended, that you have to be really compassionate about too.
So the crazy ones are the ones in the car on the way to work in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Are those out loud?
Well,
Okay,
it's
I'll be
just
the
me.
fly on the windshield then.
Mm-hmm. You get good terms with Chief Noakes?
Yes,
You like him?
I do like him.
Good. We do too. Mayor Parker.
Yes.
She's doing a good job.
As far as I can tell, I
Good.
mean, I know what I read in the paper. So
Beautiful.
that's one of my 41 cities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we appreciate you being here, Sharon. It's been an honor to hear your story. Before we go, we always ask our guests a simple question. Marital and children aside, all familial affairs aside, what's the best day of your whole life?
I probably haven't lived it yet.
That's pretty good.
That's a
We've
new
not
one.
heard that
We've
one
never
yet.
heard that.
Well, is that because it's happening right now?
No, it's because, you know, I've had a great life. So what else is there to come? There's great stuff to come.
Hope.
Yep.
I had some hope right there.
We love it. That's a winning answer. Sharen Wilson, Tarrant County DA, thank you very much
Thank
for joining
you.
us.
Thank you.